So welcome to episode 3 of Two Ball, Two Bold. I'm Marshon Parker.
I'm Nathan Tomlin.
And we are just two family men, two bankers, and two sports enthusiasts that love to talk about sports. Again, this is episode 3. If you've joined us for the first 2 episodes, you know we have a tournament style, a tournament going on rather for franchises, all-time greats. And the breakdown is the first episode we had the AFC, second episode with the NFC. And what we are doing is we are having the all-time great quarterback, running back, 2 receivers, and tight end. And we are going to eventually create a Super Bowl winner of the greatest franchise composed of the all-time greats. And Nathan's going to explain what we're doing here in episode 3.
Yeah. So this is going to be part 1, where we're going to talk about AFC defense, and we're going to do AFC West and AFC South. So for defense, we have 5 positions: an interior defensive lineman, an edge rusher, could be a defensive end or outside linebacker, an off-ball linebacker, a cornerback, and a safety. It could be either safety. So we're going to pick one player from each franchise at each one of those positions to create the all-time defense, if you will, of 5 guys. Like I said, we'll start with the AFC West. Being the resident AFC West fan here, as a Bronco fan, we're going to start with Denver. To me, again, when it's your team, I think it kind of just rolls pretty easy. But for mine, I mean, it was pretty simple. Edge rusher is undoubtedly Von Miller. Shout out to Simon Fletcher, who had the sack record for a very long time. But Von Miller was fantastic, obviously, and stepped up even in the postseason. Super Bowl MVP, one of the handful of defensive players to ever do that. Tied with Charles Haley for most sacks in Super Bowl history, despite the fact only having played in 2. He did miss that Super Bowl loss against the Seahawks. Wouldn't have helped the win, but could have potentially got a half sack to have the record to himself. But Von Miller is him, and I don't think there's a debate there. Corner, one of the most, in my opinion, underrated corners of all time, and Champ Bailey. I think he was underrated because the Broncos weren't great at that time. But I do remember, I think it was 2005, 2006, he had 10 interceptions. He had like 9 passes defense, and he only allowed like 23 catches. It was insane. He finished second defensive player of the year voting that year, despite leading the league in interceptions. And I do remember he like never got thrown at. We'd always play the Colts in the first round of the playoffs, because the Colts couldn't win on the road at that time. All right, so they would be 8-0 at home and be like 500 on the road. So they'd be like the 3 seed. We'd be the 6 because the Chiefs and then the Chargers were running the division. And so we'd make the playoffs as a wild card. We'd play the Colts, and Champ Bailey would completely shut down Marvin Harrison, and Peyton Manning would still throw for 350 yards and absolutely destroy us. He also had one of the biggest interceptions in Bronco history, returning Tom Brady back 99 yards. Gave Tom Brady his first playoff loss.
Yes. That
That Broncos team with Jake Plummer in the divisional round, after Brady, his first 3 years going to the playoffs, won Super Bowls. That 1 year in between the 3 Super Bowl wins, they didn't make it. So Champ Bailey. Safety, one of the hardest hitting guys you'll ever see. He would probably be flagged for unnecessary roughness every tackle. 2 massive hits. One is a YouTube sensation today on Christian Okoye, Nigerian Nightmare, in the hole.
on Monday Night Football.
Yes, on Monday Night Football. And the other one that I remember is in the Super Bowl, and I can't remember the receiver or the corner for the Broncos, but he knocked out the receiver, the corner, and himself all the same play in the Super Bowl victory. But it's Steve Atwater, finally got into the Hall of Fame, deservedly so. Defensive interior lineman, I went with Trevor Price. He did start as a defensive tackle on the Broncos on their Super Bowl teams. Moved to defensive end when they went to a 3-4 for 1 year before he went to Baltimore. So I used him as an interior lineman. But shout out to Derek Wolfe. I love Derek Wolfe. I love his howl when he'd run out there on the field. But Trevor Price is better career. And then for linebacker was the only one where there were really 2 guys that's like, man, I have to leave somebody off. And I went with Randy Gradishar. Randy Gradishar was the captain of Orange Crush defense. He won Defensive Player of the Year in '78 when they only allowed 14 points per game and went to the Super Bowl despite having a very poor offense. Shouldn't have even been in that game. Arguably one of the greatest defenses to ever not win a Super Bowl, I would say. But he was an absolute beast in the middle. But shout out to Mecklenburg.
Yeah. Okay.
Unfortunately, couldn't really slide into edge or a linebacker over those two guys. But those are the 5 for Denver for me.
No, I mean, look, I agree with everything you said. I do want, because when you were saying the stats, I said to myself, wait a minute, about Champ Bailey's season. It wasn't, so it was 2006.
Yeah, okay.
Now,
I knew it was sometime in the middle of the
first of all, I remember when Champ Bailey was traded for Clint Portis.
After Portis ran for over 3,000 yards and like
his first
20 touchdowns
yes.
his first 2 seasons.
And a lot of people felt like, why would you now this is going to sound totally foreign to people who just started watching football maybe in the last 10 years, but the idea was almost like, why would you trade this star running back for a cornerback? Now people would look at that as a no-brainer. But then it was a bit controversial.
Yeah.
Now the Broncos knew they could churn out other running backs,
right?
But
that system, you know too well, the 49ers Shanahan system, man.
Yes.
They had, I think, they had 4 seasons in a row with 4 different 1,000-yard rushers, if I recall correctly. Landis Gary, Mike Anderson, Reuben Drones, and in the Portis year. So yeah, they were just,
But that season though, so you're talking about 2006.
It was
even better than you said. So the ball was thrown to him 35 times.
That's insane.
And
that's twice a game.
He gave up four receptions.
And he played man. He played a man, and everyone else did zone or something.
Straight man. He allowed 4 receptions. He had 11 breakups, and he had 10 receptions.
Yeah.
So it's funny because I think Dion is who obviously eventually we will get to, but I think he's the greatest of all time. But Champ Bailey,
that may be the best season. And he didn't even win Defensive Player of the Year. Because, and that year, that was the year after, I believe, the Broncos went. No, that was the year the Broncos went to the AFC Championship game and they lost to Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers.
Yes.
And the Steelers beat the Sharks. That was the year. That was the year. So he even added an interception in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And I remember I thought he had the touchdown. I think it was Benjamin Watson. Who knocked him out like the 1 yard line.
Which was incredible. A tight end who ran probably a 4.3.
Well, Champ thought he had it.
He let off the gas a little bit. He did. No, so I mean, we're totally in agreement with the Broncos.
Yeah, cool.
I just wanted to, because that season.
That's insane.
And the thing is, I don't think a lot of people remember how great that season was.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Champ Bailey, as great as he is, he wasn't a big talker. Mm-hmm. He wasn't, and this is not me. I mean,
he played both ways in college.
He played both ways in college. He was an outstanding receiver. His brother was a really good linebacker.
Yeah, he was.
And this is not me taking shots against players who are more vocal or more, braggadocious, but he just wasn't that guy. No. And it's funny because I think if he was, I think the overall theme and how people look at him, he probably would be higher on the rankings. But he just did his job for a long time. I think 15, 16 years?
The last few years they moved him to safety.
He played for the Saints for a little while.
No. He went to safety, and he actually played in that Super Bowl against the Seahawks, and I think that was his last year.
Yeah.
And then so he wasn't part of the no-fly zone. But he was he would lock you down, man. I mean, like I said, Peyton Manning wouldn't even throw the ball. Peyton Manning has Marvin Harrison, who's arguably one of the greatest receivers ever. Peyton's one of the greatest quarterbacks ever, and they don't even throw the ball. I mean, look at the games, look at the stats, and the catches that Marvin had is when they would run play like rubs and things like that to get where Harrison could get separation, because Peyton wouldn't even attempt. He would just, the other side of the field, he'd look at the other side of the field and just pick him apart.
So I knew I wasn't going crazy. He signed with the Saints.
Yeah, I don't think he played though.
But he was only there during the offseason.
Yeah.
But it's like, you see these things in my memory bank. His last season was with the Saints, but technically it wasn't. Yeah. Now let's move on to we're staying in the AFC West, of course. So let's move to the Chiefs.
Okay.
Even though I don't even want to say the word Chiefs right now because I'm still mad about the Super Bowl, but they were pretty easy. I had, obviously you have to start with Derek Thomas. Derek Thomas was amazing. He had, I believe it was 7 sacks in the game against the Seahawks. You know, I think David Craig had to be having nightmares about him for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, man, it was nice.
Chris Jones, who obviously is active, and Chris Jones probably had the biggest play against my Niners in the Super Bowl.
He's probably, now that Aaron Donald retired, the best interior defensive lineman in football.
I think it's by far, actually.
Yeah, I agree.
And then Dale Carter, who I had, which I understand, you know, you might have somebody different. Dale Carter was a incredibly athletic cornerback out of Tennessee. And he's one of those guys that his career, he left a lot of meat on the bone. Like, he would get suspended for crazy reasons. I think he had a substance abuse issue. He was a bit of a hothead. But from a talent standpoint, when he was on the field, he was amazing. Okay. Another guy who was amazing, maybe not for as long as you would have liked. Some of it was because he had, I believe he had cancer for a while, and then his career
Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Well, that's what it was. There we go. But Eric Berry was amazing. Yeah. He's probably one of the top 3 safeties in SEC history. Eric Berry is amazing.
Yeah, in college.
Yeah. So
I'd have to look back.
In SEC.
No, I'd have to look back on safety, but he had an incredible.
Oh, he was amazing at Tennessee. And a throwback, Willie Lanier, number 60. You don't see that much. Number 60 at linebacker.
No, not anymore.
No. That's a guard number.
That's
now,
what,
right?
Well, that's what they probably played both ways half the time.
But he played on those early Chiefs teams. I think he played in Super Bowl II. Yeah. So that's who I had.
Yeah. He was one of the early ones. Yeah. So, I mean, Derek Thomas was an easy one. Chris Jones was an easy one. Willie Lanier was an easy one. I went back a little further and went with Emmett Thomas at corner, but I'm fine going with Dale Carter. One of the hardest thing, for me about the defensive teams was, in some ways it was easier because I think there were a lot more slam dunks. Yeah. Where it was just like, dude, when you think of Chiefs defensive players, Derek Thomas is the first guy you think of.
Yeah.
And Chris Jones, the impact he has, and this is where stats can be deceiving. Yeah. Chris Jones does have great stats though, but look at when he wasn't on the field, and look at when he was. And all you have to do is look at that. Look at the film. Look at the games, and see the impact a player has. Right. Watch the Rams defense this year with no Aaron Donald. I mean, even the games where Aaron Donald doesn't put up any numbers. Watch the games where watch the defense now. He's being occupied. They are not. Yeah. It is going to be a lot more difficult. The defensive coordinator has a lot more work ahead of them to make an impact. Willie Lanier was, he's a Hall of Fame linebacker from the 60s and 70s. Like I said, I mean Emmett Thomas. I'm fine going with Dale Carter. Safety. Look, there were 2 options at safety, and they both grow on trees. Right? Dad joke for y'all out there.
That was funnier than it should have been to you. That's how you know I'm a dad, but yeah.
Eric Berry and Deron Cherry, right? So Cherry in the 80s, I mean, he was one of the better safeties in the NFL. Yeah. I do agree. Eric Berry, and this is, again, where sometimes when you have, like, you're tossing between guys, you have to pick, okay, well, what am I going to weigh more than the other?
Yes.
Right? I mean, I saw Eric Berry play. I saw what he did to the Broncos. Yeah. He was a phenomenal defensive player. And unfortunately, he did, although he came back and won comeback player of the year the next year, actually. But it did obviously affect him long term, having had gone through that, and it really shortened his career. But you also have to think, I mean, the first, at least couple of years that he was in the league, there's only 2 safeties even made Pro Bowls. Yes. Right? A Pro Bowl. Not all pro, just Pro Bowl in the AFC. And you had Troy Palmer and Ed Reed.
And they were
and you had Eric Weddle on the Chargers.
Yes.
Who was also one of the better safeties. So it was tough. I'm okay going with Eric Berry because I was torn between the 2. Yeah. Cherry had a longer career. Yeah. Right? He had more impact over a longer period of time. Do I think Eric Berry was more talented? Yes.
Higher so.
It's just it was about 4 years of elite because of things outside of his control. But I'm okay going with Berry on that.
Let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not necessarily referring to Eric Berry. Mm-hmm. Now, Eric Berry is, I think, the biggest difference between the separator for me between him and Deron Cherry, who I really liked, although I hated his face mask. As a kid, I hated the one bar in the middle face mask. We used to call it the fish face mask.
Yeah.
And like to me, that was always
That's
a sign.
like a D-line.
It was a sign that you were a garbage player.
Yeah.
So if you had that, it was like, and you were good.
It was the helmets they give to the kids that weren't going to play.
There we go. Like, it bothered me that Thurman Thomas always had that, but I'm digressing. Eric Berry was a guy who could play in the slot, and I looked at him, he could do more. But I tell you, I'm curious, in the process of you doing this, how many times did you say to yourself, I know I said it multiple times, where I'm going to the safety position, and I'm like, this guy will be a linebacker now.
No, absolutely, and a lot of that goes to, again, part of the hard part about the defensive players, especially looking across eras, is the game.
Yeah.
Right. So, you already brought it up with the running backs. Just the running back alone, right, was valued so much more. Now, running back is like, dude, if you take a first-round running back, they better be an absolute game changer.
Yes.
Because you're only getting 7-8 years out of them max.
Yes.
And they're probably not going to be healthy for the whole time you have them. Where safeties now, the game has opened up more. There's a lot more passing.
They're pseudo corners.
They are.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily as big. I mean, the tight ends are smaller.
Yeah.
They're taller, but they're not as big and bulky as it used to be.
No.
I agree. Some of the safeties I'd look at and be like, man, these guys are corners. Some of the linebackers look at and be like, dude, they'd be a D tackle, like almost like, you know. And then some of the D tackles, you're like, dude, these guys only weighed, we'll get some later. Yeah. The guy weighed 250 pounds. Like, that's a linebacker now. Yeah. You know, especially with the speed and everything they have. But yeah, no, I mean, I agree. There are different types of safeties. Yeah. Eric Berry, to me, was more of a cover safety. Correct. You weren't fearful of Eric Berry blowing your head off.
He could hit.
Yeah, he could.
He wasn't like the guy. Wasn't like before.
Correct.
Yeah.
But he wasn't like, you know, like I talked about Steve Atwater.
Yeah.
You were afraid going over the middle against the Broncos.
Yes.
Because Steve Atwater was going to annihilate you. And I get the rules have changed as well. But Eric Berry, even like Cam Chancellor played at the same time. Yeah. Right. The Seahawks. Yeah, yes. Cam Chancellor, you were afraid was going to kill you.
Yes.
Right.
Literally.
But he was a linebacker playing safety.
But I'll tell you what's funny. If Steve Atwater came out now, you know who he would be? Fred Warner. He would be he would be a middle linebacker in a cover 2 scheme who could cover a lot of ground in the middle and could stop the run and run sideline to sideline. Yeah. He wouldn't even be a safety.
No, he's not fast enough.
He would be a middle linebacker. Yeah. And I kept going
over that.
The speed of
these guys is so much
better
now.
It's so different now. Yeah. Well, but okay.
So I'm fine going with Eric Berry because I did have him right there too.
Yeah.
And it was just really kind of.
You just want to get off your dad joke. That's okay. I appreciate it.
No, man,
I hope you guys appreciated that. There's nothing like a good dad joke, even though my kids don't appreciate it as much as I like them to.
Yeah.
Let's go with you want to go with the Raiders next?
Yeah. God, I hate the Raiders. So the Raiders were a difficult one because we talked about the positions that they played. So to me, there were two absolute no-doubters. I wasn't going to move off of them.
Yes. And
it was Charles Woodson at corner.
Yes.
And Jack Tatum at safety.
I agree.
So those were the two. Jack Tatum, was it Assassin? Wasn't that his nickname? Yeah. Jack Tatum embodied what the Raiders were.
Yes.
In the 70s, yes. Right? The Raiders were known as rough, tough, blue collar, dirty. If you didn't like them, if you didn't like the Raiders, you thought they were dirty. Right, that's the persona they had, and Jack Tatum was it, man.
Yes,
that dude. His nickname was Assassin. He's gonna kill you. So this is where it got interesting because where do we put guys? Right. So Ted Hendricks is arguably their best defensive player they've ever had.
Definitely their best linebacker.
I mean, but linebacker or edge, right? Because
I would say
the man was 6'7". The man was 6'7".
They call him what they call him the not the ostrich, the I'm gonna have to look that up.
All I know is he was 6'7".
Yeah.
That is intimidating. Because not even now in the NFL, the only guys 6'7" are offensive tackles. There's nobody else. There's maybe a couple players that are 6'7" that play other positions.
Pepper's about 6'6". Huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's a different freak of nature. But,
yeah.
But nowadays, NFL, if you're 6'7", you play offensive tackle.
Yes.
There may be one or two defensive tackles that are that size, right? But they don't have the athleticism, different type of athleticism, I should say.
The Mad Stork. The Mad Stork.
Mad Stork. There we go. Yeah. Because you also have Howie Long, who played defensive end. Mm-hmm. But not defensive end how we think now.
Correct.
Not a traditional edge rusher, because he did line up sometimes in the interior, in the 1 and 3 gaps. Because I feel like you have to take both of those guys.
Yes.
So if you do take both those guys, then you have Hendricks at linebacker. So then where do you put Howie Long? So I had Howie Long at edge, and I had Chester McLaughlin at defensive as an interior defensive lineman, who was a stud there in the 90s for the Raiders. So that's the group I went with, and I feel like again we're going to have the 4 of the guys the same, and it really depends on where you put the players, because I do feel like if you do put Howie Long at edge and Hendricks at linebacker, I feel like McLaughlin's the interior defensive lineman. I feel like if you put Howie Long at interior defensive lineman for edge, you open up a can of worms, because you have Khalil Mack, who won Defensive Player of the Year, only player in NFL history to be All-Pro in 2 positions.
Yes.
That was before they made it an edge. Remember, it was defensive end and linebacker, and he made it both. The guy, talk about a freak athlete, right? Khalil Mack, but didn't have a whole bit long career.
He's still playing.
In say Oakland.
Yeah.
Technically, it was in Oakland when he was there. But you do have more options, to me, at edge than you do at interior defensive lineman.
Yeah.
For the Raiders. But that's who I have.
So, me being from the Bay Area, being a big 49er fan, and the Raiders being there, my dad taking me to Raider games and things like that. Chester McLaughlin was an animal when he felt like being an animal.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys that he actually reminds me of another guy who I believe we'll both bring up with another team that, when his motor was running, he was amazing. I didn't have him down just because in my head I had Howie Long as an interior.
Okay.
I'm willing to discuss it. Obviously, I don't think it's etched in stone. And I had Charles Woodson at corner, Jack Tatum at safety. To me, Charles Woodson was the slam dunk. And Ted Hendrickson at linebacker. Now I had Khalil Mack was there. He was there long enough, so where if we
it was 4 years, I think.
If we
they traded him in his 5th year before they had to pay him.
before they had to pay him, and I'm willing to go with that. I guess I didn't really think about him because I didn't think about him being there long enough, which is ironic because when we did offense, I put Tyreek Hill, but I had Greg Townsend because I think Greg Townsend is one of those guys that I don't think people understand how long and how productive he was for how long.
Right.
Greg Townsend has 109 career sacks.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, a lot of people don't even know who he is.
Yeah.
Because he played on some really bad Raider teams.
Right.
Howie Long was more of even though he didn't play on the best teams, he did have some success in it. He was towards the beginning of his career.
Yeah.
But he was on some really bad teams too. But Howie Long, Howie Long was on movies, like Howie Long looks like an action hero.
Howie Long still looks like an action hero.
He still looks like an action hero. So it's like Howie Long.
He's in his 60s, 50s, 60s, 50s. I don't think he's 60 yet.
Put like this, he's old enough to have 2 sons who's retired.
Yeah, true.
And
they're both very good. Dude, both first overall picks.
Oh man, so I'm willing to.
So then
go in whatever direction you want to go.
So I guess then the question would be if
we're going ceiling, we could do. I'd say Howie Long interior, Khalil Mack pass rusher.
Yeah. I guess my question would be that if the 4 guys were set on. So then out of the 3 guys between McLaughlin, Townsend, and Mack.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Townsend and Mack played the same. So who are you taking between those 2? I think Khalil Mack was better.
He had a higher.
Right. Townsend was longer.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Correct.
So then between Mack and McLaughlin, what are you taking?
So
Khalil Mack obviously had. They've only had how many Defensive Player of the Years in Raider history? Only a couple.
Correct.
That I have to look and see. But Mack has one.
What do you think? What do you think about this? Howie Long in the interior, Khalil Mack is the pass rusher.
We can do that.
Ted Hendrickson is the linebacker, and then obviously.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. We can do that.
See, that seems to make the most sense from even though it's not exactly as a team building standpoint, that makes the most sense.
Well, yeah, Howie Long looks wouldn't even play on the line anymore. Look at him. Maybe defensive end, maybe, but he'd be more of a stand-up outside linebacker than defensive end.
Maybe
his size.
Maybe a 4-3 defensive end, or maybe
that's what I'm saying.
Maybe he'd be bigger. I mean, maybe,
I don't know. His son. I mean, his son was pretty big.
Yeah.
Both of them were pretty big. Okay, so then Chargers, San Diego / LA.
LA, yeah. I still call them San Diego.
I do too. They'll never be LA Chargers.
I'll never get used to that, but for the most part, I thought they were pretty easy.
Yeah.
But I think we might have a discussion with one position specifically that I'm pretty 50-50 on.
Yeah.
But Junior Seau is the obvious one to me. That's not
one
even
of the greatest.
Yeah, that's not even worth bringing up.
He was the greatest between, in my opinion.
Yeah.
At that position, he kind of took the baton from Singletary and then handed it to Ray Lewis.
I agree with that.
That's what I think.
I agree with that. Although
Ray Lewis is the best.
I do believe.
We got a different conversation about that, but I do think, and maybe it wasn't exact.
Yeah.
Maybe Singletary there may have been a few years in between there, but
yeah.
To me that when the early '90s, early to mid '90s, Seau was the middle linebacker to me, and then once Ray Lewis for almost 15 years, and you had some other players which we will talk about, but
I have one specific guy that I think for the back half of Ray Lewis's career.
Yeah, but I'm saying from the mid '90s to early or mid 2000s, I think it was Ray Lewis for majority of that 10 years.
Now I also say this is I am a part of the, and I want to be in this group alone. I am a part of the Hardy Nickerson should be in the Hall of Fame group.
Okay.
I think Hardy Nickerson is right there, probably with Junior Seau. It's just that he happened to play for the Tapioca Bucks. So when they had the Tapioca uniforms, and they were terrible. But Hardy Nickerson was unbelievable. But I think from a standpoint of just who you think about when you think about the middle linebacker position, who carried the baton not just with this play, but with how he kind of carried the position and how he carried himself, which makes it even more sad of the ending.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other story because we don't want to take it that direction. But I will agree with you there. Now, pass rusher, I had Leslie O'Neal, who had over 100 career sacks. I'm willing to listen to. I'm willing. Again, he had a terrible face mask, but that's all another story. He did have the visor along with it.
He's a big defensive end.
He was a big guy. But although I'm willing to listen to Sean Merriman, who I think had a probably higher 3-year stretch. But the thing about him too is you also have to add in the how much did the PEDs come into play. So and then cornerback, I'm actually interested to hear your take on this. I had Antonio Cromartie. Antonio Cromartie at his height was a shutdown corner, and he is a guy that
it's the only thing he shut down.
Yeah. Hey, listen, interceptions wasn't the only thing he has a lot of, right? But he had 10 interceptions in 1 year. Very long rangey guy. I think he was about 6'3", 6'4".
He was 6'3", yeah. Which is big for a corner.
Big for a corner. Long arms. We were a real rangy guy. And on the interior, I thought more of like a run stopper. So I thought about Jamal Williams, who was a unit.
Dude,
like
that man was an immovable object.
He was eating blockers. Just eating
3
blockers.
guys.
Yeah.
And that was when, big teams were still running the football.
Yes.
Then, yeah.
Yes.
I know all too well. Broncos zone scheme with Shanahan always likes smaller offensive linemen.
Oh, yeah.
It'd take 3 of them to block him. And still not moving him. He's just occupying space. Yeah. And then safety.
I'm sorry. That's the. So, I said Rodney Harrison just by a sliver, but I'm willing to listen if you want to have a discussion about Eric Weddle.
Got you.
Because Eric Weddle was. Rodney Harrison was and this is kind of what we were talking about before about the transition of safety, right? Rodney Harrison was the intimidator. He was the guy who started out as a special team ace. He was going to knock your head off if you came across the middle. He was decent in coverage. Whereas Eric Weddle was more of your safety position more now.
Right.
Where he was more of a coverage. I mean, in college, he played, I think once he played five positions.
Yeah.
He was like,
he played linebacker.
Eric Weddle was a maniac. Punt returner, kick returner, played I think a little bit of offense. But he was amazing at the safety position. Man. So, amazing beard. Amazing
Shout out
beard.
coming out of retirement after almost 2 years. And
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I had Leslie O'Neal too. Sean Merriman, look, you want to talk about a peak, actually, I think Sean Merriman's career high in sacks was 17.5. I think Leslie O'Neal's was 17.5.
Yeah, but I think the next season he also had like 15, and then it was
he had about 3 years.
Yes.
And then he got suspended for PEDs.
Yeah.
And it's like...
fell off.
Yeah. So, to me, Leslie O'Neal was the guy. Junior Seau was the no-brainer. Yeah. I went with Antonio Cromartie as well. Because they don't have... His peak was very good. And I remember the Broncos... I hated the guy, man. He always made a play against Broncos. And that was the tweener time of the Broncos. When we had Jake Plummer, the Broncos actually won games.
They did. And
then went to Jay Cutler. And Jay Cutler is one of probably the biggest wastes of talent I've ever seen.
Him and Jeff George.
Yeah. Well, they're kind of the same person.
Yeah.
I think Jay Cutler was a little bigger, though. Yeah. But anyway, he'd throw the ball to Antonio once or twice a year. And then Kyle Lorton. God. Anyway. No, I had Cromartie, too. I think he had his best years were on the Chargers.
Yeah.
He had 1 or 2 good years on the Jets, too. But his best years were on the Chargers. And they really don't have a corner that you're like, when you think of the Chargers, you think of a corner. They've had a few guys that have had a good year or two. But yeah, I went with Cromartie. Defensive tackle, I was between two guys. And to your point, you went with a run stopper, Jamal Williams. I went with a pass rusher, and Gary Johnson. Now, I'm perfectly fine with Jamal Williams. He was my other choice. And it's, again, where it's just a preference. If we're playing today, I'm taking Gary Johnson.
Yeah.
If we're playing 15-plus years ago, I'm taking probably Jamal Williams. If I could have both, that'd be fantastic because they would complement each other fantastically. And safety, I went with Weddle over Rodney Harrison because I think Eric Weddle's impact was greater than Rodney Harrison's, and maybe that's unfair to Rodney because Junior Seau was the middle linebacker. And Eric Weddle never played well.
He played with some very good,
but not on Junior Seau's level.
No.
Right? So maybe it's a little unfair to say it that way, but I feel like Eric Weddle had a bigger impact and was a bigger reason as to why the Chargers, they had some successful years. Now they never won, of course. And then he went to Baltimore and played great in Baltimore. And, I went with Weddle. I think Eric Weddle had a better career than Rodney Harrison.
And I think he's actually more known for being a Charger. I think at this point...
he's definitely more known for Chargers.
Most people know Rodney Harrison probably for being a Patriot.
Well, that's just because of the team's success. The team's success. But I went with Weddle.
I'm fine.
So, I mean, I'm good with Jamal Williams.
Yeah.
Because, again, I had him. It was just a preference. Yeah. And then, but I did go with Weddle.
I'm fine with Weddle because it was pretty much like 51-49.
Yeah.
So,
Perfect. I mean, it was tough because I was like, man, how long did Rodney play on the Chargers? Because that's the first thing I thought, too. I was like, I knew he was a Charger.
Yeah.
But you think of him as a Patriot. His better years, he did have a good year or two on New England, but really that was it. Most of it was on the Chargers. So we'll go to the AFC South now. So the AFC South, we'll start with the Colts.
Okay. All right.
The Colts were easy for me with the exception of one position I had to go in a bag for. Edge was Dwight Freeney.
Yeah.
Shout out Robert Mathis, who was really good too, but I think Freeney was slightly better.
I was trying to find a way. Can I get them both in there? And I said,
they're both legit edges.
Yeah.
And Dwight Freeney very undersized for a DN.
Yes.
At that time.
Yes.
Would definitely, if he played now, would be an outside linebacker. Safety, one of 5 safeties ever win Defensive Player of the Year, Bob Sanders. And again, this goes back to what I talked about with Chris Jones. The impact he has was so great because, remember, the Colts with Peyton Manning, their biggest issue, it was not, to me, it wasn't really Peyton choking in the playoffs. Did he play as well? No, but he was also playing elite defenses in the postseason, a lot of times on the road. And these other teams were playing their defense that was not great. And when Bob Sanders wasn't there, they really weren't great. They had good pass rushers, but the pass rushers are negated by a lead.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So if you have a lead, the pass rush doesn't do much for you.
Right.
So Bob Sanders, his impact was felt, I think, more really with him not being on the field than him being on the field, just that difference. Inside linebacker, I went with Darius Shaquille Leonard.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
And I did that because look at the first 4 years of his career.
Yeah.
And my God, now he's no longer even on the team, but that start to a career, he was a first or second team All-Pro 4 years in a row to start his career at middle linebacker.
Yeah. I mean,
he was on a Patrick Willis, Luke Kuechly type of trajectory, and then the wheels fell off. Injuries. D-tackle, I was between two guys. Old school Art Donovan.
Oh, wow, you went back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Real old school Art Donovan.
Oh, yeah.
And part of the reason why I'm leaning towards this other guy is because that is so old school, DeForest Buckner. DeForest Buckner has been there for 3 years.
Yes.
He's made, he's already, I think, in the top 10 in sacks in the Colts history, despite the fact playing defensive tackle. Talk about this guy's 6'7", I think he's solid 6'7", isn't he? He's a massive man. You obviously know him well as a 49er.
Yeah.
But I put Buckner over Donovan, even though Donovan's a Hall of Famer, just because of those guys that played so long ago. It's hard because the competition, the rules were so different.
Totally different game.
I mean, it's really obviously I never watched him. I can only see clips of him.
Correct.
But DeForest Buckner wrecks, dude, inside.
Yes, he does.
And then corner, this is where I had to go. Pick somebody. I went Bobby Boyd. Again, old school.
Okay.
But I didn't have anybody that stuck out to me.
Yeah.
I almost went with Davis.
Oh.
But I was like, dude,
R.I.P.
how he...
R.I.P.
Yeah. But how he went out, I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
You know, I couldn't do it. But anyway, those were my 5 for the Colts.
So we actually don't have a lot of the same ones, and I think
Freeney and Sanders probably.
Yeah. You know, and I think it's funny because the Colts are abundant when it comes to offensive talent. But I tell you, man, it's picking like straws.
But that's what I mean. The defense, it's either a shoe-in or dude.
Or they had guys who like flashed.
Yeah.
Like Steve Entman, who they drafted #1 overall, and I think it was 92. He flashed, but injuries. You know, Quentin Coryatt, that draft, they had the first and second pick in the draft. They drafted D-tackle first. They drafted outside linebacker second. Quentin Coryatt flashed, but didn't have like the extended career. But what I did for the Colts is I had Dwight Freeney, obviously. Let's go with the no-brainers. I had Dwight Freeney, and I had Bob Sanders, Bob Sanders was just
undersized too. I think he was 5'9", wasn't he?
He was my size.
5'8",
I mean, obviously bigger, like more muscle, but he was about 5'8", 5'9".
Yeah, he was a small guy.
But his play just wrecked his body.
Yeah.
But he was amazing when he did play. And Dwight Freeney, I mean, come on, Dwight Freeney is like,
will be.
So for middle linebacker, and I think more because, you know, me being an 80s baby, and I really kind of thought about this player as a Colt more so than I do, you know, Shaq Leonard. Whereas like now we kind of look at the Colts and we look at them as like they're offensive guys based off of everything going on.
Yeah.
But Dwayne Beckett,
who
he was Defensive Rookie of the Year. I believe he went to 1 or 2 Pro Bowls. He was a tackling machine, but he was like a consistent. He was like he was the Colts middle linebacker for like 8 years.
Gotcha.
And he was like a guy that you just. First of all, he was a guy that as a sports car collector, it felt like you were always pulling his card.
Right.
And so it's like, but he was just one of those guys that like if you knew football, you just kind of respected him.
Right.
Right. But I'm willing to because I mean Shaq Leonard.
Shaq Leonard played 4.5 years on the Colts, and the first 4 years he was first or second team.
He was amazing. He was.
I mean that's insane.
That is a Hall of Fame.
You know what I mean?
That's like the old.
And if you're talking about a guy that's
defense.
8 years,
yeah.
I'll bet you Shaq Leonard has more Pro Bowls in half the time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely.
And he was just. I remember when they drafted him in his rookie year, he could have. I mean, the emphasis is so much on sacks now. It's almost impossible for someone that's not a sack artist to win a Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah.
But Darius Leonard came close, in my opinion. That rookie year was. He had like 150 tackles. He had like 5 picks. He had like 3 fumble recoveries.
It was
He had like 2 touchdowns. I mean, it was dumb.
Now for defensive tackle.
Mm-hmm.
It was funny because I wanted to put my guy, but I was thinking like,
DeForest?
I was thinking like, did he play long enough? I'm still.
Well, he just signed the contract extension, so he's got 3 years under his belt. If he plays out the contract, that's another 4 years, I think.
Yeah.
And then you probably would be like, unless an injury, you'd probably be like it's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer, and I'm actually fine with that. I put Ellis Johnson because he was a Colt for so long and a productive Colt, but I'm definitely wanting to go with DeForest. Now, corner. I
couldn't have picked anybody.
I went Eugene Daniels.
Okay.
I went Eugene Daniels, and I put maybe Ray Buchanan. But more,
I think Ray Buchanan is a Falcon.
I knew you were gonna say it. It's a Falcon. It's a Falcon.
So I
think if I'm not mistaken, I think Eugene Daniels, which is funny because. Like corner is definitely one of those positions where
it's hard to judge, man.
The stats can lie.
Because look at the guys from the '60s.
Yeah,
they all had 7-8 interceptions a year.
Well,
every single one of them.
Well, because quarterbacks would throw more interceptions than touchdowns.
But, you can knock somebody out for the balls there. But that's my point. Is the game has changed so much. The stats are different. I mean, it's almost like, that's where again. Then I default to how are they compared to contemporaries, right?
Yes.
Look at their Pro Bowls. Look at their All-Pros.
Yeah.
Because, if they have those type of statistics, well then, if you're an All-Pro corner, first or second team, you're one of the top 4 corners in the NFL that year.
Yes. Well, this is the thing, too.
If you're a Pro Bowler, you're one of the top 4 in your conference. You're one of the top 8. Now, again, I get it. In the 60s, you have, 12 teams, 14 teams?
Yeah.
So,
and the top
especially before there was AFL. No, absolutely. They didn't need to.
Yeah.
So it was tough. So I'm fine. I'm fine switching my corner.
It's funny too
because I was like, I'm looking. I'm like, there was nobody that I was like, when I think of the Colts corners, who do I think of?
Yeah.
And honestly, it was Davis. And I was like, I can't put him because of how he retired. And I know it wasn't as a Colt, but I'm like, I can't put him on any list because of that.
I get it.
It just was bizarre.
Well, just even the fact of like interceptions, like the context we talked about with Champ Bailey, that's amazing because he only so many attempts.
He caught 25% of the passes.
But usually, like Sauce Walker, I'm not Sauce Walker.
Gardner.
That's the rapper. Sauce Gardner, I think we can all agree.
He had no interceptions last year. But they don't throw him the ball.
And he has like 1 interception his whole career.
I think he had 2 his rookie year. But yeah, I get your point.
But a person who doesn't, they're just basing off like a fantasy football player. They'll say like, he's not that good. The ball's not coming his way.
Right.
So
yeah. That is why corner. That's what I said with corner. So I'm fine changing it.
So what do you say?
We'll go Daniels. That's fine.
And I'm cool with Shaq Leonard.
I'm good. I think it's Shaq Leonard, man. To me, that's a no-brainer.
And I'm cool with DeForest.
The 4 years he had were arguably the 4 best years of any middle linebacker in Colts history. The top 4 years.
Yeah.
So if you have all those years, I don't care if that's all you had.
It rivals
they
any
were
of
all
their
the
defensive players.
That's what I'm saying.
Like not just
other than Freeney had some freakish years, but all right. So next team for the South, who you want to go with? 2 of them are so new. And then one's old. So you want to go with the newer franchise or old school?
So I'll go with the Jaguars.
Okay. Yeah.
To me,
Jaguars are gonna be interesting.
There was really only one no-brainer, maybe 2.
I had.
Jalen Ramsey is a no-brainer.
Jalen Ramsey.
Now the other no-brainer, it might surprise you. Tony Perkins. Tony Brackens was amazing defensive end. Good pass rusher. Good against the run. Big guy. Huge guy.
He played his whole career on Jacksonville, didn't he?
Yeah. Yes.
10 years or so. 10,
So
years
great defensive, not great, very good defensive end. Now the D tackles, I'm split.
I know what 2 you're split.
I'm split between John Henderson and Marcus Stroud. The linebacker, I chose Kevin Hardy, but I'm willing to listen to Miles Jack. I'm willing to listen to Paul Pasowski. I'm willing to listen to those two. Puzzlesny. There we go.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm really willing to listen to because Miles Jack was really good. Miles Jack. He was a good running back at UCLA too.
He was good. Yeah.
But I lean towards Kevin Hardy, who him and Simeon Rice were college students.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how they both ended up at Illinois because Illinois was terrible.
Yeah.
But that's
they've
another
never
story.
been good. I can't even tell you.
Yeah. I don't know how those two guys ended up there, but and then for safety, I was thinking maybe Donovan Darius.
Okay.
That's the closest thing I can think. Who again? He would be another guy who would be a linebacker right now.
So for me, I mean, it was pretty simple. The only one to me that really there was a conversation about was edge.
Okay.
Because Brackens was good, but he was never anything. To me, I think he made one Pro Bowl. I mean, he was not anything special. So I had Jalen Ramsey.
Mm-hmm.
I had Donovan Darius. He was a slam dunk to be a safety. He was a stud back in the day.
He was
a good safety.
Very good.
I went Stroud over Henderson. I think Stroud had more good years than Henderson, in my opinion. And they played together, which is crazy. But I went with Stroud. I went with Puzzlesny as a linebacker, man. I mean, he was a tackling machine.
He was
for 5 years or so.
Yeah.
Kevin Hardy. I'm flexible on linebacker. That one wasn't as much of a slam dunk to me. I do think, and I'm blanking on his name. The kid they just drafted 2 years ago out of Utah. If he stays healthy and stays with the team, we'll probably end up taking it. And I'm blanking on his name right now.
Linebacker?
Yeah, they drafted him the same draft they drafted Walker. And then edge, I actually went a different route because Tony Brackens was nothing special, in my opinion. And I say that facetiously because, I mean, the guy played in the NFL for 10 years, so obviously special, but he was never, you were never feared of him.
Yeah.
I don't think teams schemed against Tony Brackens.
No.
I went with Calais Campbell, who 3 years on Saxonville, made 3 Pro Bowls, was an All-Pro 1 year.
But do you look at
was
his
an absolute stud.
Well,
he was a defense. But he was a defensive end in the 4-3. I do think I will say this though.
Yeah.
Depending on what happens this year, next year that's Josh Allen. And Josh Allen just signed that contract, 5 years, $150 million.
I agree with that.
So he is now playing for another 5 years in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
He needs one more year similar to last year, and he's it.
I agree.
Last year he had 17.5 sacks.
Mm-hmm.
He had over 10 his rookie year, and then those 3 years in between were kind of lost. He was injured. I think all 3 years he had various injuries. But if he
played good when he was on the field. Played excellent.
Yeah. I mean, but the bookend years of that first 5 years were both very good. And over 10 sacks as a rookie, and that was a 16-game season. It's phenomenal. And then last year he was like second league in sacks. But I did go with Campbell. If you want to put Campbell as the interior, then I would take Campbell over Stroud. So, to be honest, because his impact there, like, look, he gets there, and they immediately win. With
I know.
Blake Bortles as your quarterback. My goodness. Yes, Blake Bortles as your quarterback.
It was Bortles.
And again, no offense to the guy, but come on now. So I mean, if you want to put Campbell as the interior, I would. But in my opinion, I'd keep him at edge because I would take Stroud over Brackens.
I'm fine with that.
I would take Stroud over Brackens.
I'm fine with that. I just didn't. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
And linebacker, I'm fine going with Kevin Hardy. Let's go a little old school. I think Puzzlesny was more.
Bill.
Well, he was. The game's changed. You know what I mean? But Penn State linebackers are studs, man. They just produce, man. They produce. So you want to go with Hardy? We can go with Hardy.
So Calais Campbell.
Because I had Hardy as my second linebacker. I had
Stroud, Jalen Ramsey, Donovan Darius, Kevin Hardy.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
And then, so I'll go. I'll go to Houston. I'll leave Tennessee, Houston for you. Houston was interesting because, of course, they're the newest franchise.
Yeah.
They had one absolute no doubt slam dunk.
Yeah.
Which is J.J. Watt.
Yeah.
And this is where it's interesting because he is a 3-4 D end.
Mm-hmm.
Was J.J. Swat, which
Swat.
typically is more of an interior lineman. So we can talk about where we want to put him. So I had put him at edge, but I'm okay moving him to interior and putting Jadeveon Clowney at edge or putting, I think eventually will be Will Anderson. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name right now. You're going to bring him up, so I'll let you bring him up because I'm blanking on his name.
Mario Williams.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was like, the guy got drafted for Reggie Bush. Linebacker was between two guys. It was between D'Amico Ryans and Brian Cushing. If you look, it's actually their numbers are eerily similar. But I went Cushing because they're a little longer. He won Defensive Rookie of the Year. So did D'Amico Ryans. If you want to go Ryans over Cushing, I'm okay with that. Ryan obviously is now a very good coach.
Yeah.
I went Jonathan Joseph at corner was a slam dunk to me just because they don't have any. They've had a couple guys that have had a year or two, but Jonathan Joseph was there for a while, so Jonathan Joseph was pretty slam dunk for me.
Yeah.
Because I went with Watt at edge, I went with Amobi Okoye at D tackle. You remember him?
Mm.
He was drafted in like 04 or 05 or something like that.
Yeah.
Interior, he was a bigger defensive tackle. But again, if we put
how
Watt interior,
huh? You know how old he was when he got drafted?
Yeah, he was like 19 or something like that.
He started college at 16.
Yeah. So if we move Watt interior, then we can have a different conversation. And then safety, I went with Justin Reed. He played the first 3 years there. Now on the Chiefs. But I mean, I'm open to listening. There was nobody that stood out at safety for me from Houston.
No, I listen. I agree. So I might have, I may have got creative, but I put J.J. Watt on the interior.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
I have Mario Williams on the outside.
They did line him up everywhere.
Yeah.
When it was a for sure passing situation, he went outside.
Yeah.
But
I also wanted to. So I had J.J. Watt on the interior, Mario Williams on the outside pass rush, and I shout out Whitney Merciless.
Merciless.
I'm not too terrible with names, but he was a really good player.
He had a couple really good. He had a few really good years. He was solid for a long time.
He was. And I went with D'Amico.
Yeah, and I'm okay with that.
Just because I think he's more.
The last few years of Cushing's career, he was injured too, and so he didn't play a lot.
And PEDs. Like I don't want to, because look, we're just guys talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
Like I have so much respect for guys who even made it to the league, let alone guys who performed at a high level. Mm-hmm. But it's got to come up in the conversation.
Can we just talk about that USC linebacker core, though?
Goodness.
Golly.
So
Clay Matthews, Clay Matthews never got caught, but tell me, that dude was nothing until his senior year. It's hard to think.
I like to think the family genes kicked in.
Yes, but it's hard to think the guy played with somebody that did it and probably was doing it in college.
Yeah.
And you didn't do it, but physically look at
I think he was just a late bloomer.
I hope so. Because, their family has...
They're NFL royalty. They're NFL royalty, but this is the thing. They weren't even the best linebackers on that team.
Yeah. Not Luka.
He was a maniac. He was like...
He had a pretty decent career.
He had a good career in the NFL, but he was like if Troy Polamalu grew inches and gained weight and played linebacker. Yeah. And then they had I had so much hope for him when the Niners drafted him. And they had Taylor Mays, who was their size at safety.
Oh, God.
That defense was crazy.
That was nasty.
But yeah. So
so who did you have at safety?
The same. They're not a franchise that's rich with safeties.
Yeah. Cool. So I'm fine. I'm fine.
Now at corner though, I had Dante Robinson.
Yeah,
But you actually sold me when you made the point. Joseph had a much longer career with the Texans. So
I mean, their best years are probably comparable, but
Yeah.
Joseph then tacked on more years.
He did.
You know what I mean? I don't think Robinson's best years in Houston were that much better than Joseph's.
No,
You know what I mean?
No.
And so that's where I make that.
No.
distinction.
I'm down with that.
Cool. All right, and then so then finish it up with the Houston Oilers / Tennessee Titans.
Yeah. So they were.
This is another one. That was difficult,
It's
man.
funny though. Like I was looking, I was like, okay, you got to remember that they were the Houston Oilers as well. But I think all the guys I picked were from their Titan years. I mean,
not me.
I could be wrong. Actually, you know what? No. They were. I think they were still the Oilers, maybe for some. But the slam dunks for me were Javon Curse. Javon Curse was
The freak.
He was
The freak.
and he earned that nickname.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about a defensive end he probably legitimately ran a 4.3 4.4.
Right.
I mean, he was ridiculous. The only thing that slowed him down, I think, from like a Hall of Fame career was getting beat up. And some of those guys who are
I don't think he was close to the Hall of Fame, to be
no.
honest.
But what I'm saying is the trajectory.
Oh,
like,
the start of his career was as good
I
as
think what
anybody's.
slowed him down from keeping that pace is he started getting nicked up a lot. And I think that lends to my
the
idea
first 3
that
years of his career
Yeah.
were absolutely unreal.
he probably has
and then he just nothing.
he probably has the greatest defensive rookie season ever.
Yeah, I mean he's up there.
Yeah.
He's up there.
But and then for me, linebacker was Keith Bulluck.
Okay.
Who was
Yeah, I remember Keith Bulluck.
yeah. Oh yeah. Cornerback, I had Samari Rowe.
Okay.
Defensive tackle, and we talked about take away the end of his career when he was on another team. If you take that out of your mind and you just remember his time with the Titans, Albert Hainsworth
Okay.
was
And that's who you're comparing to Chester McLaughlin.
yes. He had moments where if he decided I want to be the best, he was unblockable. The only issue with him, if he had a motor that kept going, he would have a yellow jacket because the talent was there.
Yeah.
He won defense player of the year.
Albert Hainsworth?
I'm pretty
No,
sure
he
he
didn't.
did. You
No.
sure about
Yeah,
that?
I'm positive. Yeah, there's not many D tackles that have won it. And he's not one of them, man.
I'm going to hold on. Let me just because
I think he only made 2 Pro Bowls? 3 Pro Bowls?
he's only 42.
Bro, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, he's not old.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was getting him confused with somebody else. But he was a first-team All-Pro 2 years, 2 Pro Bowls. When he wanted to be, he was amazing. And then obviously he got the $100 million contract and then just decided he didn't want to.
He also had other. He reminded me a lot of Ndamukong Suh too. He would do a bunch of dumb stuff, like he'd let his anger get the best.
He would.
And then who was your safety?
Blaine Bishop.
Okay, yeah, I remember Blaine Bishop. So we had 1,
Okay.
and it was Samari Roll.
Really?
Yeah, because I don't think they had that many corners. Edge, I wanted to go with Javon Curse, and I'm probably willing to go ahead and switch because the beginning of his career was.
So who'd you
He
have?
had the best beginning of a career for a pass rusher ever.
Who'd you have?
I had Eldon Bethea. That's going back, and so that's where again I'm okay listening to Curse. Linebacker though, I'm sorry, Robert Brazil. I mean, come on, man. D tackle I went with Ray Childress because look at Albert Hainsworth's career. He had 2 years.
So
That's it. He was such to me.
No.
He was such a turnoff.
You had no. You got me there because
On which one?
the Ray Childress one.
Okay.
My uncle played for the Houston Oilers. I mean, this was years ago. He played for the Houston Oilers, before I was alive. But because of that, my grandfather was a big Houston Oilers fan. And we would watch, we like Warren Moon, and we use them on Tecmo Bowl, things like that. You know, they have to run and shoot offense, so they were fun to watch. Although when they lost that game against the Bills, I was rooting for the Bills. But Ray Childress was like the stalwart on their defense, and I'm actually very disappointed with myself that I didn't remember that. I totally you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Because I was thinking, Albert Hensel was like, but how many? I do remember his up and down career.
Yeah.
And when you look at his career, it's a massive disappointment.
Yeah, especially out of college.
He had those 2 fantastic years where he was the best defensive tackle in the NFL.
Yeah.
And then the couple, I think that was his 3rd and 4th year in the league, if I'm not mistaken. The first couple years in the league, you're thinking like, dude, what? This guy was a monster in college. What happened?
Yes.
And then he does it.
Yeah.
And does it again. And then to your point, they pay him money. And I remember he went to the Broncos at one point. They tried it, but anyway. But yeah, Robert Brazil, linebacker, and then safety. I was between Blaine Bishop and Kevin Byard.
I get that.
So,
I was too.
Because Kevin Byard, to me, Bishop has the longevity. I think Byard's years he was there were better. He had a couple really good years.
Yeah.
He was number 1 in the NFL in interceptions for over a 4-year span.
Yeah.
And so that's what led me to go with Kevin Byard. But I mean, Bishop, I'm willing to listen to. But I think Byard's peak, his better years, he had probably 2 or 3 years that were better than any of Blaine Bishop's. Blaine Bishop's just had, double the years in Tennessee. So, Houston, did he start as an Oiler?
Yeah.
Or did he start as an Oiler?
He started.
Bishop, right?
He started.
So in Houston, Tennessee. So I went with Byard though.
I'm fine with that. I mean, I think it's the curse thing though.
I told you I'm willing to go. I'm willing to go with Kurt because the like I said, the beginning of his career is arguably. I don't think it's arguably. I think it's the best beginning to a career of any edge rusher.
He's the Odell Beckham of defense.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Odell was on a ridiculous pace.
Yeah.
I'm willing to go with Curse, but I do think it's Brazil a linebacker, man. I'm sorry.
I'm willing to go.
Because he had a nickname, man. I'm
tackle machine, right? I'm not saying that was a nickname.
But he was
a tackle machine. I mean, Keith Bullock was a very, very, very underrated player on teams that were mainly noted for their running.
I mean, Brazil's a Hall of Famer, man.
Yeah.
I mean, he played in the 70s and 80s. Yeah. It's not like he played.
No, I know.
Come on. So to me, Bullock is not sniffing the hall, bro.
I just, it's funny because when we did offense, I felt like I was more willing to give
the older guys
more love. But on defense, I think...
Well, the game has changed so much. So, and that's where it is difficult because would Robert Brazil play middle linebacker today? No. Would
heck, Ronnie Lott would be a linebacker now.
That's my point. I mean, these guys would not be playing the same positions. It's so different. But they would also they'd be different themselves.
That's true.
You know what I mean? Because the game is different. So it is a difficult one. But yeah, I think it's definitely Robert Brazil, man. And then safety, do you want to go with Byard or do you want to go with Bishop?
Let's go with Byard.
Okay.
Because he was second on mine.
All right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, that takes to the end of episode 3, part 1. We'll pick up episode 3, part 2, and talk about the AFC North and AFC East defense. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you. We'll see you soon.
Yes.
Sign out.